All right, we are live. Check it out. Check it out. All right, so welcome to it. If you're tuning in, I know it was a long 3 minutes, and I appreciate it. All right, so this is the first episode of the Convergence podcast in almost 3 years, and this is episode 16. So you can go to YouTube, you can check that out. Those are on playlist. I just want to let you know that this is going to be the audio from this is going to be taken, and a podcast is going to be created. The idea is to give an unedited audio of the actual interview, but there could be pauses, breaks, so on and so forth that don't play very well in a podcast. So those will be edited out. The content in and of itself will not be edited. That's the intent of doing it live, to give an audience a preview of what will be coming up, the backdoor stuff, as we're getting ready, the jokes, whatever, that don't necessarily make the podcast on either end of going to or coming back from a break. So that's the format. So if it seems a little odd to you guys, this is a podcast. Yes, the audio is going to be taken at a later date. The podcast actually hasn't officially started. I'm just giving you guys a preview. Welcome to it. Like I said, I'm 97 Bravo, and we're basically we've talked a little bit. My guest Mike here. We've talked a little bit over the course of the last week, and the function of this interview, discussion, however you want to look at it, has evolved over the course of the week. So we'll get into that. So basically, what I want to do is, if in your mind you can imagine an intro, I'm gonna go ahead and do a little pause. I'm gonna pretend like an intro is just finished playing, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into the interview. Unless you need a minute there, Mike. If you're ready to go, we'll get ready. We'll get into it.
Oh no, I'm good. Do I sound all right?
You're good to
Thank
go?
you.
Yeah, you sound good. All right, we'll get into it. Brief pause. All right, welcome to it. I am 97 Bravo. Welcome to episode 16 of the Convergence podcast. It's been a long time coming. Almost 3 years, just 3 months shy of 3 years since the last episode I did. If you want to catch up on those, they are in the playlist, the Convergence podcast live, it on YouTube. So what is it? YouTube.com / at 97 Bravo, I guess how they're doing it now. But enough of that. You guys didn't come here for me. You came here for Mike. Welcome to it, Mike. Why don't you jump in here, say hi to folks, and let us know a little bit about yourself?
Thank you very much for asking me to come and take part in a resurgence to your channel, and thank you for everybody that's listening. Obviously, I haven't done a show for I, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 2 or 3 years, and so I'm grateful just to be able to speak about old times and that sort of thing, which I think is what we're going to talk about for the first little while.
Yeah.
Um, my name is Michael Rogers. It's the real moniker I use on my Twitter handle and in social media. Is really me. It's my real email. It's my real account. I don't hide behind any avatars. It's always been me. Um, I started in what I call the Indosphere, which most of you listening might understand what I'm talking about. The videographers and the creators, and the comic book creators, and that whole umbrella for all of the independent people that were moving away from the sandbox of the mainstream because, well, they wouldn't share the toys anymore. So we had to do it ourselves. And so
Right.
when I retired from commercial beekeeping, my wife pushed on me because I wrote my whole life, just not for anybody else but me, I suppose. And so in my kind of semi-retirement, she said, you should really do that since she worked out in banking and in law. And so um, to be at home with the kids, I had to have something to do where I'd go crazy because they were all in school age kids right at that point, a long time during the day with nothing to do. So um, I started writing and sending out applications to proofread and edit, like just like anybody does in so many places you don't even remember. and
Right.
I think it was like a year and a half later, I got a call from Al Mega at Comic Crusaders, and he started talking. And I mean, I understood what he was asking if I was interested, but I couldn't remember. Like I'd sent so many, I couldn't remember. I was like, "Can you please explain to me again, like who you are?" And so it ended up. It was kind of embarrassing. But again, like I was the new guy, I was only expecting to get a proofreading job or something like that.
Right.
But he offered me 3 reviews of new comics coming out every week, plus a Saturday be open for my own column. And I thought, well, it's kind of a lot of, quite an extreme to what I was actually, seeking in the first place. So Of course, I said yes, and it filled up my time, obviously, so it was good.
Right on.
Um, and it moved on to a period where some people might understand and remember certain events in the Indosphere that occurred in 2018 with Jeremy Hambley at Gen Con. So there was a little bit of a political shuffle at Comic Crusaders, I guess you could say, as a result of one of my articles in support of Jeremy.
So
Um,
why don't you touch
and
on that in case people aren't aware of the particulars?
well, I gotta be careful to respect Jeremy because I have a great deal of respect for him, and his legal affairs surrounding this incident was very well
Certainly.
handled and very private and all that sort of thing. So we can talk about the public details.
Sure.
But what had occurred, like everybody knows, is that the Gen Con 50th anniversary Gen Con happened in 2018. Um, and it was in August, and I think it was August over the weekend of August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, an assault had occurred against Jeremy by an individual. At that event, there had been some threats, and outside the venue, at a separate third-party venue, an altercation of a type had occurred, and legal ramifications from that whole incident ensued. But at 2:31 in the morning that same night, after Jeremy had posted a video from the incident, I made my first, I don't know, public commentary article, I guess you could say, talking about this outrage in our industry, in our community. And what and what ended up happening was, because it was the first night of Gen Con on Friday night and it was so late at the publication at Comic Crusaders, all the editors, everybody's all over the world, right? So they weren't there. There was assistant editors helping people with writing tasks for the publication during the weekend, but it was kind of like skeleton crew shit. And in response to this article, I had no idea about the politics, like all this cancel culture. Like I had no idea. Like I was literally just running my column and totally devoted to the work that I was doing. I Looking back, it was like I had blinders on. I wasn't even paying attention. Um, the 2017, 2018, and the incident at Gen Con happened in 2000 on the 50th anniversary, right? Um, of 18, yeah. So things became political to the point where the assistant editors on Sunday made a rebuttal article to my article in support of Handley. This is Jeremy Handley of the Quartering, by the way. So that um, and what ended up happening is, our at that time there were three independent newspapers with Banding into Comics, Bleeding Fool, and Chaos Central, and these were like the conduits of information for everybody in this buzz, in this industry, or this community that we were making, right? Um, and so they made a rebuttal to my article. And so imagine that you've got a newspaper, online newspaper, where you've got two opposing points of view slammed right on the front cover, and everybody inside the publication are literally chewing on each other. Of course, I was in the middle of it. I had no idea what was going on, right? And by when Jeremy was furious, of course, I mean, rightfully so. It was good and bad exposure. It was good. Well, it was good and bad exposure, and in public confusion, like all mixed into one. It was awful, right? Um, and the lawyers for Comic Crusaders were standing up in group meetings that we were having Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and defending me and saying, "Well, no, but he called the sources in, New Haven in Connecticut, and he called Wisconsin, and he called, like, look at the record of, like, look at his work, right?" So when they decided to fire me, needless to say, because I caused this stir in the community, right? The lawyer fellow, the lawyer fellow for I won't mention his name, but the lawyer fellow for Comic Crusader, if he's listening, maybe, I don't know, maybe he's listening. He left with me. So he was
Interesting.
just mad.
Well, yeah.
Um, just so that you know, that's a Mexican national who works for Marvel in translation.
Mm-hmm.
Made an We used to call, he made a call, but he probably whipped an email. And I got a phone call, or sorry, I got an email at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that same afternoon that I got let go. And it was Agent J at Bleeding Fool, and he said, "I heard it's getting political over there on your desk at Comic Crusaders." And I said, "Holy shit!" Right? And he said, "Would you like a new desk?" And I said, "Sure." And
Okay.
so I
Well,
got my
hold on.
logins, and I got my logins and literally logged into a new desk the same afternoon.
That same afternoon. Now,
Yeah.
Comic Crusaders, go into the. who were they for people who don't know who maybe weren't
Well,
around in
it's
the
just like any of the other. It's like the your generic video game and pop culture kind of online publication. Like there's all sorts of them, like
Okay,
Kotaku or a million of them. Well, even like
okay,
us at Bleeding Fool or Chaos Central. Bounding into comics, all of them. I mean, they've all evolved in a way. Like,
gotcha.
keep in mind, I'm talking about 2017, 2018.
Right.
Everything's still very niche. Still very small. A very tight community, right?
It's like WordPress and it was yeah,
It absolutely was. And
yeah.
my editor at Comic Crusaders was Johnny the Machine, and he and I stayed in contact. It wasn't a harsh feeling on his part. He was sort of stuck in the middle too. So he was
Right.
my first editor, Johnny the Machine, and he was a good fellow to me and talked to me afterwards and all that. And yeah, Al Mega was the owner at the time, and I really believe that Al, um, because keep in mind I didn't know about the politics at the time. I do now, looking back, right? So
Right.
I can imagine that the SJWs literally peeled his asshole out and just didn't give him a choice. Like it wasn't really like they were going to raise hell. Like they
Yeah.
literally went international within 24 hours. It was crazy. So
That yeah.
yeah, I apologize. I apologize here publicly for the first chance to get, obviously, to Jeremy Hambley for that terrible confusion, because after the exchange emails we had back then, he never spoke to me again. And to be quite frank with you, I don't fucking blame him, right?
Well, yeah. I mean the well, it just I don't know. I don't really have a commentary on why he may or may not have continued. I mean that is odd, but
Yeah. Well, no, but I
given
mean
given the
that's
circumstances,
in
the
so far
murkiness
in the
of the
past. Well,
right,
that's it. And the thing is, at the time, it really was a small niche thing. Like I mean, still, even for me, like, he would consider himself sitting at the bar just hanging out, be a normal person, 500,000 subs, and like we're just people, right? And it
right,
was back then, it was just people trying
right,
to build something. And
right,
when something that he really had a momentum, and it really, I could tell it deflated the situation, and for a while it looked really troublesome. And like I said, I didn't mean to play any part in that. I was actually on his side the whole time. I just mean that the publication and the people that I had around me were not who I thought they were, right?
right.
And they caused a situation based on my hard work, which is something that we might be able to get into that happened a second time later on too. Needless to say.
Well, and that's yeah. We'll sort of go chronologically in broad strokes, but I think the and that but that touches on a point that the interconnectivity of the different communities. I mean, you there are aspects that obviously overlap. If there's a new Marvel movie coming out and everybody's talking about it, there's going to be overlap, especially if you've got 15,000 opinions and 15,000 YouTube channels or whatever it is. But the and you touched on something earlier that I thought was important was the fact that it there when I so this iteration of 97 Bravo is the second iteration of 97 Bravo. The first iteration started in January of 2017. So it was solely for the lead up. I was only on Twitter solely for the lead up of The Last Jedi and became I thought the personality aspect of it would be fun and that's the direction I chose and my point of that was that I got in with a lot didn't get in that's not the word started following and started getting involved in the different communities that were also excited for the Last Jedi and those sorts of things and a lot of these names I mean the Quarterling I've heard since then or whatever but some of these names have since disappeared um, from that time frame so Last Jedi comes out December of 2017, almost
Yeah.
immediately after the self-imposed review embargo, the very nice things that people were doing to kind of really stay quiet about the crap we just saw. Once
Yeah, like I frequently thought about that. Yeah.
it the community started to really shift in January after the review embargo lifted or whatever you want to call it. But it was like the end of December,
Well,
early January where everyone just started, "Oh my god, what the fuck was that?"
well,
And
felt like an explosion or like a volcano. I remember. But you
r-
touched on something a second ago too when you were talking about the time frame that we're talking about, like I've imagined quite a bit that during COVID times when lockdown happened, there was a lot of people who were at home
Right.
who got a chance to explore and learn and see and get into communities like this, obviously. And there's might be listeners out there that are hearing this right now, but just a few couple of years before that, the in the build up to that time period, I guess, the the whole tone and atmosphere of the community was well, it was joyful. It was like a circus
Right.
all the time.
Right.
So when The Last Jedi came out at that, because we were already confused by the first iteration, and unlike you, because I was working in media at the time, the backlash to The Last Jedi was instantaneous. Instantaneous.
Mm.
It was nothing organically growing. It was instant vitriol
Oh yeah.
instantly.
Well, in the Twitter sphere, you know, on actual real people, it was instant. I mean, as far as like trying not to spoil it for people and actually out loud talking about specific plot points and shit like that. That's the aspect that I was talking about as far as people were kind of holding off on. But yeah, no, it was. Do you remember the script or the plot points that came out like the October and November before the movie dropped? So,
Oh yeah, well that had
my,
already the
right.
leaking culture had already been going on for maybe 2 years at that point, and like there was a lot of DC stuff that was getting worked on, Sony stuff and Warner Brothers stuff that was getting leaked too. So it wasn't
Well,
just Lucasfilm.
the the Force Awakens, I think it was like May or June when there was like plot point script, however you want to look at it, whatever you a summary when that leaked online, and it was almost beat for beat for what we ended up seeing in the movie. What was interesting and what started at the closer to The Last Jedi we were getting, there was starting to get this rumbling, this oh shit feeling, this why haven't we seen this? Why haven't like the questions started to be brought up about different aspects of leaking, like the there's no way these leaks could be real because they were so audacious, and whereas the Force Awakens leaks, it was like, oh, because it kind of played into what we had already known, but everything we
Well, I
were
mean the leaks
starting
were
to
one.
learn. But we were starting to learn
I mean
before the movie came out that it was going to be a different presentation, and the vitriol began before, like it started. They waited to have the world premiere until real late, didn't they? There was like all kinds of like bullshit in December, and people were starting to get like, oh shit, the leak was real, like very nervous, and like the tone started to change so that when the movie dropped, people were like in the movie theater going, fuck. When they, by the time that Leia
I
Poppins,
walked out.
oh, did you? I was with my daughter.
Yeah.
I've said that it was by the time Leia Poppins flew out of the thing, I was done with the movie because it was already beat for beat for the leaks, and I knew what was coming, and I didn't want to fucking see it. But that's just me. That's just based off of how excited I was for 2 years, based off of the surprise I had with the Force Awakens. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed where Star Wars could go, and there was a lot of us like that. And so for 2 years we were like, holy shit, here we go. And then to just have that air be taken out of that shit like right before the movie, dude,
Well,
I've
that's
never gone
those are aspects that we can talk about.
oh
Like we
totally,
call
I
that
mean,
label slapping. Like I wrote articles about this. Like we call this label slapping, and that was the betrayal that everybody felt. Like the OG Phantom Menace people, I suppose you could say, but
right,
that was what the betrayal was that they got us in the seats because they slapped a label on it. And Star Wars
exactly,
is famous for this. Any kid that grew up in the '80s, we had toasters, we had friggin' Pez dispensers, we had lunch boxes, we had sleeping bags, we had like imagine it.
totally, totally.
Like
I
we
mean,
so of course they label slapped it. But the point is that we were expecting more from Lucasfilm because we had felt that sense of betrayal from George for so many years dragging it out. And so when Disney label slapped us into our seats, we were already asking questions by The Force Awakens. Like we just didn't understand like what is going on here. And by the time the second iteration came out, like they were already attacking fans. So for me, watching it from a newspaper perspective as an editorialist, looking at the whole culture, I could see it in a totally different way. And believe me, that it was the fans had almost pretty near had it with Disney, not just Lucasfilms, but just bashing of the customer base. Like it was absolutely appalling. Like I
oh,
wrote a book on it. Like it was
Disney's absolute backlash, the response that the creators had to the fan base that was upset with legitimate arguments. And then once everybody started breaking it down and got,
Well, here's what people need to understand.
once it
Here's what
hit
people need to
Blu-ray, it
understand
was
about that.
over.
It wasn't, no, no, but it wasn't, but wait a second. It wasn't even arguments at that point. People were confused and upset and they had questions. And instead of questions answered, they got abuse. Do you understand? Like it was,
Oh yeah.
people don't understand. Like this is, it was really different than it is now. Like the fans weren't raging and frothing at the mouth the way they are now. They really were asking legitimate. They thought the studios would listen to them.
Well,
They really did.
it was the first time that everybody will point back to Ghostbusters 2016. Yes, there was controversy and some bullshit around that, but that's a girl rendition of Ghostbusters, okay? No one was giving it. It's not fucking Star Wars. You know what I mean? It's not Star Wars. And it's not what Marvel became, and it's not what DC hopes to be. And so
No, but what
that
you're
was not a
describing are what we call cultural edifices. We're talking about cultural edifices. It doesn't matter what genre they're in.
no,
These
no,
are
no, but
pillars
what,
of our culture, and they were
right.
they were under attack everywhere,
But
everywhere.
but what I mean is that the first time I legitimately remember a studio going after its fans was after The Last Jedi. When the creators of The Last Jedi, not just the journalists, because that shit's been going on. That shit's been going on since The Force Awakens, since Disney bought it,
Wow.
actually.
Well, then we need to get some battle. We need to get some Battlestar Galactica people on here to tell you what it's really all about. Because holy crap!
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, we can go down rabbit holes, surely, but from my recollection, I don't in recent history, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, someone will, I'm sure, but it I don't remember a studio actually going after its fans saying, you don't know what you're talking about. Um, you're sexist, you're racist. I mean, these things this tone started to shift, and
Well,
much like you're talking about.
maybe that's construing things. The studios weren't doing, their actors and their employees were, and they weren't correcting. It's a fair assessment.
Well, that a lot of that um, comes from the attitude, that we saw that was being portrayed. The wetting themselves over the fact that there's an all female, creative team, and wetting themselves over the fact that there's this, that, promoting the first female this, promoting the first female that. There's this air that they were saying things without saying things, and people were picking up what they were putting down even though they were denying it. That then led their creatives to think that they had the green light because it was talked about at Lucasfilm, I'm guessing, so very fucking often that they just felt, well, yeah, Kathy's not going to mind if I say this, that, or the other thing because I've heard her say this, that, or the other thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that they were given permission or that they were told, hey, go out there and do these things. But I
Well, no,
think
no, but
that,
it's way past the point where we can say that this wasn't policy. This was policy. Okay.
well, this is what I'm saying. In the original trilogy, okay, let's just, not even the original trilogy, because let's give the original trilogy its time. The prequels, when the prequels came out, if you remember watching the behind the scenes, or I don't know if you've seen it, but the people who have seen the behind the scenes, this was like, all right, people, cut the shit. We're making a Star Wars movie for the first time in I don't know how many years. This is an important thing. Let's get our heads out of our asses. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was the endeavor that was the prequels. The all right, here we go. We're making a trilogy. You know what I'm saying? And it was this huge, moving, ginormous. I don't know. Once it got going, there's no way you can't make three movies once you say you're going to make a new trilogy. You know what I'm saying? So the first one bombs, and so they have all of that weight going into that. But it appeared, and I'm not saying Disney people didn't, but it appeared that there was so much gravitas put on the fact that, all right, here we go, we're making this movie. And then come to find out, all these rumors start leaking out, in and around The Last Jedi, especially when people were so pissed because people started digging and they started looking for interviews, they started looking for articles, they started looking for these different things. Um, there was a culture that was created that, very much like with the movie The Last Jedi, is a big middle finger to the fans who were leaning into that sequel. there was this I don't know. It became
What do you mean? The studio didn't do enough to protect people that like their stuff, or like I don't
no,
understand.
the studio shifted because there was such a basically from my point of view, the vast majority of the people were leaning into the movie. And then from my perspective, once the movie came out, they knew it was going to be dog shit. Okay. Then once it came out, and the people who were actually legitimately giving it, calling it dog shit, and giving it and actually illustrating point by point why it is that way, those were the people that the studio and then of course the culture below it began to demonize and vilify and marginalize and those sorts of things, because that opinion didn't matter. The only opinion that mattered was the fact that this movie existed and we gave it a green light because of whatever reasons. Now,
Yeah, and look at how blind to an entire generation of action in the real world these things have consumed in everybody. I mean, the lesson that these original stories have that inspire and propel us forward with dreams and inspiration, sure.
right.
But at this point, when Disney purchases something for $2.4 billion, and then they start like, let's just ask them, it really can be near. And this is what people don't understand. The fans were confused. Go to a restaurant where the waiter walks to your table, gives your plate, spits in it, and walks away. You're gonna keep going.
No. I'm
No.
no.
And like the fans at that time, they were confused. Like they didn't understand why they weren't being listened to. They couldn't understand that this was a business model that anybody wouldn't be convinced would be totally destructive, but it kept going
Right.
and it kept going. And not just, and we keep talking about Star Wars. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. Like they were doing this to every single edifice and culture simultaneously everywhere,
Well, and that's
from
the
Gamergate
frustration.
to all of it. Like it was
This
happening everywhere. It was not unintentional. Does
no.
anybody understand what I'm saying? Like this was not.
Yes, it was a full body at some point. At some point, I don't even know. There must have been a meeting, because there was such a full body industry. I mean, like entertainment industry shift to this is how we're doing business now, and all dissenters will be vilified, just run out. I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
that's just this is how we're doing business.
it's
Just
what's it's the same mechanisms that have been operating, manipulating people at what we call in the real world, not just in the industry, not just the mechanics of our
but
fantasies and our dream works,
no,
but in
but that
all aspects of our lives. Yes, it was simultaneous everywhere. Of course there was a meeting like 40 years ago.
but well,
of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
of course there was.
of course. That's a rabbit hole for a different show. But that's my point, is that there was such a gravitational shift through all the studios, both movie, gaming, comic. It just this is what we're doing now, and everybody on that side of the aisle just not politically, but everybody who was championing it just leaned into it so hard they completely disregarded what the fans were talking about, and through that frustration, the fans, they're not fucking, they're not listening to us, they're
But
not
that's
doing
what did happen.
right. But that's what I'm
But
saying,
that's
is
what
that
did happen.
through
They
that,
politicized everything.
I know, and through that was the
They took
discovery, the
cultural issues.
right, and was the birth of these different things. And this is what we started to get into
Yeah.
offline over the course of last week, was the
This
fandom menace.
response, and this
Right.
is and this is a good that's a good segue, because this is the kind of behavior by large billion-dollar studios and their employees towards the people that pay their bills. This is what created sentiments and movements within the industry, like the Phantom Menace.
But it was an unintended consequence, and they have
Absolutely.
tried their damnedest to stifle, to shut up, to push any voices. I mean, some of these people I don't agree with, okay? Some of these people I haven't talked to in years. All right? Some of these people I've never talked to. But I know of
Absolutely.
a lot of these names. And for a couple years I orbited very closely to that whole group, and did the whole in the bio thing, the fandom menace and all that stuff at one point too. There are aspects of what I was doing that sort of I gravitated off and ended up doing my own thing. But my point is that the love, want, and interest for these movies and TV shows to do well was there. It wasn't lacking. And that's what I think that these studios miss, these everybody's gaming studios, comics, movies, is that we're not hating on the IP. We're hating on your decisions for the IP. And this is now our response. And in poor fashion, in taking the lead on this, I think, well, Comic Gate was already in full swing, but as far as the movie industry go, Disney
Absolutely.
taking Bob Iger doing his thing, going against Florida. You got the COVID, all the bullshit going on, and then in this 2018 to 2020, the entire notion of you will you will like what movies we give you and you will shut up about it. That time was over. And the internet and then plus COVID, this engine began that a lot of angry fans were sort of gravitating towards, and it was this energy, this sort of counterculture punk energy that was being developed, that was not all, oh golly gee willikers, another Star Wars movie I will love. You know what I mean? There are those people that, bless their hearts, genuinely love everything about Star Wars. Okay, not talking about those people, love those people. The people I'm talking about, who everybody who does anything like this, whether it's in their garage or their very nice room in Florida or whatever have you, my point is, anybody who does this and kind of has their ear to the ground around how podcasts and the industry and movies and, whatever it is, inside information on games and comics and movies, has picked up over the years that things have changed. People have changed. The fight is not the same. The battle has shifted. We're no longer on the beach. We're now in the mountains. Different tactics are needed. And the other side, the people who are continually pushing this narrative, they're still doing it. They're still coming out with games and stuff that are still going to fail. But we know in advance that, okay, we've got these websites that kind of label these games as being DEI or cancel culture or whatever have you, and so we're just not going to participate in those, and they're failing. And it's also happening with movies. Disney's losing billions. The industry's losing billions. Are they going to pay attention?
Well,
That
this is
brings us
also an unintended consequence of cancel culture. This is on another, like you're
it.
describing extremely well. That is another unintended, and I think it's good. I think it's good for the community to. It's not gatekeeping. A lot of people are
No,
calling it. It's not
no,
gatekeeping. It's the fans who are paying the bills have decided en masse what they like and what they don't like, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I'm glad there's a voice for it.
and they've taken to social media to ensure that their voices are heard. This is the first time in my lifetime that we were able to go in and actually change the sway of an industry. I mean, if we were able to do this in the 80s, we wouldn't have as many shitty movies in the 80s as we did. But
Well, people
nevertheless,
forget they did do it in the 80s. They did do it in the 80s. So you can go back and look back through Star Trek history and the letter writing
oh,
campaigns
oh
and the
yes, 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 yes.
inspirations to get the movies restarted. I mean, these things, fans did it. It was just not so fast without the internet. That's
It
all.
was not so fast, and it didn't have the traction. It didn't have the visibility of, oh my God, person X that just directed this last movie saw my tweet and retweeted it. There was very little chance that someone, or even some of these momentums, CBS, they got, I think, Star Trek to do reruns, and there was a bunch of stuff that Firefly and fans have tried to do, over the years with different
Longest
projects and stuff.
syndicated, longest syndicated program on television.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's all genius, but I think we live in a time where, shit, Elon Musk, because he just has a burr up his ass about a certain game or something, may key into some comment you make, like, oh, I didn't like it because of X, Y, and Z, and Elon Musk runs with your, retweets it or something, then boom, that's it. You know what I mean? It's out there, and that wasn't something that I grew up with. If you wrote a letter, you just a fart in the wind, you're like, yeah, they won't read it, whatever. It's just another one on the desk, or however you want to look at it.
Well,
But
that's something that people might not understand either. With digitization came our digital information wars, and people might not know this, but we're in the fourth digital information war. So, most of the history we're talking about happened in the third. Strangely
right,
enough, it keeps happening faster. That's the thing about these letter writing campaigns that we were just talking about back then yes, they were different. Yes, it was slower, but you have to understand when people are that invested to have real paper where they have to get their paper route money to go and get the envelopes, go and buy the stamps, go down and walk to the post office and put the letter in the thing. People are heavily invested in this. Okay. So when you talk about enthusiasm in a community back then, you have to understand not only were they more invested, but it wasn't a dopamine hit like we get on these phones all day long now with our culture now. They literally had to sustain it, and the effort and the enthusiasm for it, it lasted longer because of the investment that these people had in their franchises and in their intellectual properties. And so the like you were saying yourself, this is what led to their syndication and then the movies and everything else. But these cultures and these little communities, this little industry, it's grown immensely with digitization. But make no mistake, science fiction fans and fantasy and escapist fans, they've existed for as long as literature has existed. Okay, and that's the really important thing that people don't understand. Like it's a real cultural thing, and it's really important to people.
Oh, most definitely. And I again, I've gotten in trouble with some of my tweets, and I do it half-heartedly. I it's not that it's half-hearted. I'm genuine in what I say. It's just that I don't genuinely mean harm. Typically my harm is directed. If someone says something shitty, I'll say something shitty back. But typically I'm not like a blanket, so I say, "Oh, good morning, nerds," stuff like that. I'm not being derogatory or shit like that cuz I consider myself one too. To what degree? That's to everybody's own, that's for everybody to choose on their own, but I do think that the importance of telling stories, telling good stories, having the cave paintings, having the honesty and accurate reporting and those elements that we took for granted for so many decades just appear under attack. And when you have an industry that, to your point earlier, is that you said, we're the fans, we're the ones paying the bills. These empires, and I've said it before, and I know several big names have laughed, but the empires have forgotten who built the empires. Yes, the creativeness, the engine that is Hollywood is an entity that we pay to entertain us. That's the function. That's the that's the relationship. I don't know at what point they lost their way and they think it's the other way around. I think it's a lot of the books that they're reading about what kind of government they would actually like to see take over in our country.
Nah, it's the same as everything. It's just money and power, man. It's just money and power. It's the same thing as
Uh,
everything.
right, but at this particular juncture, that mirrors very heavily in this particular country, anyways. One. I'm not to say that they're not on both sides of the political spectrum, but one political party seems to be leaning in that direction as far as corruptness, like pardoning your entire family and shit like that. But I digress. One thing I did want to ask around this time frame. So we're in between. We're not quite to 2020 yet. Um,
Oh
you have
no, 2019 was a very busy year. Yeah, it was
right.
before that. Yeah.
So towards the end, so walk me through when and about did your involvement with the Fandom Menace truly kick off in earnest?
Well, like I said, when I got to Bleeding Fool, I continued writing my dedicated reviews for independent writers and even mainstream ones, like I did Boom and Image and Marvel and everybody. I really gravitated towards independent guys like Peter Smetty, and I really want to give a shout out to him. And I'm so glad that he's doing so well and it's still growing, and I'm so proud and happy of him. Um, but that said, the real thing that I enjoyed was having my column, so I could be an editorialist on the weekends and make commentary on culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would have been right around the time when I guess you could say that the niche had it becomes so sophisticated, the culture just within I would say the demographic at that time in what I call the Indosphere, which is like the Gamergate kids and the fucking Weebos and the videographers and the cinematographers, all the like there's fandom menace creators that want to be movie creators and have created amazing fan works as we've seen. But
Right.
that umbrella, I call it the Indosphere. But like we were talking earlier, certain factions started to rise up in the community in positions of influence, or maybe an aspect of crowdfunding or comic book creation like Comicsgate. And in this instance, for Comicsgate, it was the war campaign, for example, was late 2018 going into 2019. They're a very
I remember that.
influential subgroup of the genre. A lot
Yeah.
of people out there might remember them too. They've evolved just like the rest have into different things, but that's what culture does, right? Like that's what culture's supposed to do.
Well, yes, yes. Even if it rubs up against the sides of society and rubs it the wrong way, the sometimes that motion, much like a clam on an oyster, it's necessary for the or even a fire in a national forest or one of the forests in California. It's necessary in order to get the pine cones to open up, so the trees can, do its thing with seeds. So there is a need for strife. Where where does it kick off? Okay, so what I think you know what I'm trying to lead into, but what I'm trying to do is with your
Little segue maybe for you.
right. So basically, so fill in the gap because I don't necessarily know how to segue it because
So
so you would
in
then
between this time when I
involve
start, yeah, so in between this time after I get my desk at Bleeding Fool, and like I said, he gave me the same deal at my new desk, and so as we lead into more uh, cultural, well, I can call it shearing, like a shearing force in culture, because it was causing all these fractures everywhere that were making all these little tribal groups just fracturing society into all these angry little mobs. And for me in real life, I was having family difficulties, and I had to start working in legal affairs on my own because I didn't have any help or support
right.
or anything like that. So I had to learn, and I'm in Canada. Obviously, civil law here is a little bit different than in the States, but I had to learn those things myself. And so I remember in September of 2018. And I made this. You were asking me about some to try to go back and get some names so I could remember some people that helped me. Flipped out. I don't even know if he's still around, but back then he did some small creations that were pretty entertaining and inspiring for the community. And he was quite a community
You broke up there. Who was that?
first. His name was Flipp, Doubt,
Yeah,
and he used to do
you're
skits where
breaking up.
he
Was that the
hold on,
puppets guy? Hold on.
other
There's
fellas
slight tech.
jump out and jump back if you want.
There you go. Wait, hold on. Yeah, there was a slight. I
What
think
about
it's
now?
I think it's the muting and unmuting. To tell you the truth, I don't think that,
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just leave it there.
unless you're doing something incredibly loud, I have filters that can kind of take.
No, I'm just trying to maintain
Oh no, you're
my
fine.
stream etiquette. Will mute myself when I'm not talking. A lot of people still don't do that. I noticed, but anyway, it's just me.
Oh no,
Old school.
you're
Um,
totally fine. Oh, you sound good now. So
okay, so when I'm working at my desk at Bleeding Fool and flipped out, um, I I believe it was in September of 2018, and he reached out to me and he said, "You know what, man?" Because the Phantom Menace was becoming a real thing at that point, and a lot of creators were getting over 20,000 subs, and it was really beginning to feel like a real phenomenon, even though it still had that wonderful circus feel.
right.
And so I was having troubles in real life, and so flipped out contacted me. He said, "There's this guy who's been bugging everybody." And everybody wanted to talk to me to promote their materials. And so a lot of people used to contact me at that point because I used to have a desk at the newspaper, right?
Mm.
So, it was an interesting life at that time. It was nice. But he said, there's this guy that keeps bugging everybody about this frig. A lot of people like your writing and think you're the better writer over on that side of things. And so, like, can you help this guy? And I was, like I said, in real life, I was like, holy, like, how much can I take? Like, so I told him, I said, well, I'm interested. Obviously, I would like to work on a writing project. Obviously, I would like to start publishing soon, independent publishing. And so, yeah, I'm interested, but like, I can't really do anything about it right now. But tell the guy I'm interested if he wants to send me an email, but he never did. And
I
then
see.
things happen in real life. Things happen in real life. And by January or February of 2019, I think it was January or February of 2019. I was talking to Flipped Out again, and his real name's Chris. Um, I was talking to Chris again, and he said, did that guy ever email you? I said, no. He goes, he just sent a bunch of emails to people again. He started a crowdfunding campaign. He seems really serious, Mike. If you're free and clear now and you got your internet back, why don't you see if you can help this guy. Maybe if you guys do a project together, you can pay your bills." And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing, right? And so I sent him an email, and we kind of chatted for a little bit, but we really never got serious about anything. And I don't think he took me seriously because I was really busy too. I was doing a lot of legal stuff in real life, so I was kind of cranky, I guess. But by July, Stephen Walton asked me if I would. This is the fellow that Flip introduced me to try to help him learn how to edit or do something with this book project or idea that he had. And so we had a meeting and contract signed between July 16th and the 23rd of July in 2019. And well, the rest is history, I guess.
What's the history?
So that's how I became. Well, the history is, I guess, I became the editor in chief of the Phantom Menace project at that point. And
Oh,
so,
there you go.
I mean, I'm
Okay.
sure there's people out there that understand what it may be or what it might have been or whatever it became.
Well,
But
what
I don't
was
know
it?
if anybody
Why
even
don't
wants to hear.
you why don't you fill people in who may not know, and then remind people who may know a little bit of what we're talking about, but didn't know the granulars.
Sure. By the time we got to that period, not just me and other people, but I mean, I commented on it in my column. Obviously, I talk to you constantly. So a lot of people were inspired by the community. Like, it seemed like the people that wanted to create things and share things was just accelerating and like, in spite of the major studios and the mainstream media and all of that, it seemed like in our little industry, in our little niche, that it was growing, and it was good. Um, And so this fella, Stephen Walton, he had an idea where he wanted to talk about how he was drawn to the community. And then he wanted to figure out how we could showcase these really interesting personalities that were popping up. Most of them are YouTubers that most people would recognize now. But
Right.
how do we make, I don't know, like, it not maybe necessarily a yearbook, but more like a showcase of the personalities that were starting to affect culture, which we thought was pretty important. And so we started a project, and then I start building on that. And it was such a big community, even at that time, once we started putting the ideas together, that there's no way it would fit in one book. And so I turned it into a series of volumes, 5 volumes. And the first one was copy edited, was sent to the printers in New Jersey at Lightning Press on December 19th. Is that what I sent you today? December 19th,
Yeah.
2019?
Something like that.
the,
Yeah.
the copy edited portion, and then the tracking number for the pallet of books that I had printed up for the project. And I mean, it was an interesting time because, like, Jeremy Griggs at Geeks and Gamers had us on, and John Talks, and like, we were on so many different shows to promote. Like, I guess we were promoting the project, but really what we were promoting was the people. Like, does that make any sense?
No, it does. And the reason it does is because that was so at the end of 2018 into 2019 was my transition from my other 97 Bravo iteration into this one, which was a
Ah,
combination of political and gaming and basically everything in one instead of trying to segment this shit. My point is that there was a change of personality, and so what I was looking for at that particular point was gravitating towards, and through the last 2 years since 2017, this wave of discontent with Hollywood and like you were talking about, for me anyways, Comicgate was going on. It was on the periphery, but dissatisfaction was happening over there. Video game stuff was already starting. The bullshit with video games was starting. So it was amalgamation of things, leaving 2018 going into 2019. uh so the reason it's relevant to me, I watched it not from necessarily, not obviously from your point of view, but watching this from the periphery, you're actually filling in a lot of the information as far as, like, on our side. I wasn't in the weeds in any of that regard as far as the volumes and the books. My perspective was someone who was excited, to your point, was excited about this community that seemed to be excited about everybody being excited. And so it was not just about necessarily one IP like Star Wars. It was about a community that, through our shared discontent for the direction of how Hollywood was going, although we probably didn't know it at the time, or at least some of us didn't, was that we were becoming part of the cultural movement, and we wanted to actually have our hands dirty, have our hands in it. We wanted to be part of. Um,
That's what I mean about the joy and the enthusiasm. It was a
right.
very it was a very different space in 18, 19, and 20, just before the pandemic. Like it really was. The whole atmosphere was totally different.
Everybody was doing, hey, I got this thing going on, podcast. Yeah, man. So basically, by the turn of 2019 into COVID in early 2020, people were primed. There were so many people who had placed themselves. They were either writing books and they never had before. They were either writing comic books, illustrating comic books. They were like you to your point earlier. They were directing movies or shorts or skits. Or there was a guy in a completely different community who was just balls to the walls, hilarious, sort of unpredictable Jerry Lewis, Jim Carrey sort of thing. And he does skits all the time and he's completely self funded and doesn't want anything to do with the vast majority of the big stuff. Not for personality reasons, but just for creative, from a creative aspect, he's just off doing his own thing, man. You know what I mean? And that aspect, that joy, it was infectious to be around, and it got me doing this. I mean, credited a lot of them. Some of the finite aspects of it I've refined over time, but the passion for, hey, that looks fun. Not that, oh, I think I can do that, or I think I can get 1 million subscribers. No, that looks fun. That's the
Sure.
driving factor to a lot of these, a lot of anybody who has an extra room and they just throw up a camera, or they, got a space in their garage, or any number of things. They're just throwing it together and talking with their friends about shit that they love. And I said infectious before, but yeah, it was definitely something that it was a fire that.
Well, there was no recession, so everybody was working. Everybody was literally giggling themselves all through work all day on Twitter, waiting to get home, and literally the evenings were just a celebration of, like, we were so separate from anything in the main, especially in the Phantom Menace, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about Comicsgate and Gamersgate, like, everybody has to understand, like, the gamer problem goes all the way back to 2012. Like, that is an older, longer part of the story. Like, there were already things that were ongoing for a very long time. And also the exciting things that were going on, that, not to get too far away from what you were saying, the crossover elements. I mean,
Right.
we had people like Viva Frey, David Frey, who's a legal expert from Canada. He lives in Florida now, but he talks all politics now. But the Industry used to be so many of these small little creators from all, like, even Ricada Law, which, I don't know how much anybody wants to talk about him, but there was huge crossovers in conversations that creators had to have, or should have had, about intellectual properties and protecting themselves and contracts, and like all the things that should have been dealt with as this huge creative space was exploding. And everybody was just so enthusiastic, nobody would listen. It was kind of a curious time, actually. And now everybody is complaining about all the problems that they didn't foresee, because they wouldn't listen, I guess, or like whatever.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think that became, at least for me anyways, that became sort of towards the end of 2020, that became my sort of um straw, final straw with that group as sort of an entity, the idea of that, the aspect. And a lot of the people who were around there was sort of this marching tone of conformity, and then there was a lockdownness as to far as, whereas just like the year before, like you were just saying, there was this rising tides will lift all boats sort of feel, like, hey, cool, promote me, I'll promote you, cool, promote me, I'll promote, there was this, everybody was happy for everybody, just like the year before. And
And
then,
then you mean there was a period where it moved into purity testing, right?
right, and then it was, well, how much do you give to super chats? Not if they're not saying this, of course, but there's less interaction, there's less this, there's less that, you know what I'm saying, there, oh, you're
Well,
you're not subscribing
I
to me.
just want everybody out. Well, I just want everybody out there to understand that I'm like one of the old school people, and I was never interested in promoting myself or anything like that at all. I was only into celebrating other people. And I have to tell you, from the long view, I don't have much support for people that complain and moan and whine about their subs and that people aren't helping them like this. And no offense to anybody, seriously, I've listened to it for almost a decade, and the only thing that can change your outcome is how you apply your craft. All
Hmm.
right. It's up to you and your audience and nobody else. And that's, you know,
Yep, that's it. I mean, you have to like what you love. You know what I'm saying? You have to like what you do, type thing. You can't just say, "Oh, that can make me money. I'm gonna go be a game streamer, or I'm gonna go be a YouTuber," or those sorts of things. To your point, it is sort of you either have to come to terms with the fact that this is a hobby that could potentially possibly make a little bit of money, or this is something that could blow up and become something more and lead to more and whatever have you. And you have to be okay
anybody that's
with
ever
both
asked me
outcomes.
about any of that, I keep away from that. I simply, when people ask me about that, because, I ran successful campaigns. My first campaign was 153% over target, so when people ask me, what you should do, I think, like you were just touching on it, and you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. You should do what pleases you and what satisfies you. And I'll just make a painting analogy. There's some people that put the oil on the canvas and they keep going and they keep going. They don't know when to put the fucking brush down. Right? You got
Right,
to put the
right,
brush down and
right,
you got to
right.
step away. And when it's done, it's done. But when you're satisfied with it, that's all that should matter. Don't think about all these peripheral things. Apply your trade, do your promotions, make sure people understand that they're aware of you and like all these things. But what I mean is don't do it because you're trying to get somewhere. Do it because it pleases you. Because if it pleases you, I can assure you, even in the 9 million member small niche community like the Indosphere, if you like it and you like what you do, I guarantee you that there's people out there that like it too. I
it'll
guarantee
to-
it.
it'll totally come across. It's genuine. You know what I mean? Like if you go into a group of people and you're like, "Oh, check this out, check this out, check this out," because you are proud of what you've done and you want to share it. You're eager to share it with people. That energy is infectious, and the people are, "Oh shit, show me what you got." You know what I mean? They're like, "Oh, this energy starts to build," and then it becomes contagious, and they're just like, "Holy shit, you did a new thing. Oh, cool, you did a new thing too." And I'm doing a new thing, and it was that. And I think
It's a positive. It's what we call it. No, you're right. We call that a positive feedback loop, and that's
right.
exactly what it is. And
And
that's
there's
and that's how things grow organically, and they keep growing, right? And that's a good thing, right?
and I think a lot of people who weren't into they weren't into the nitty gritty, or perhaps weren't there every week, during the videos or whatever, the live streams. There was a tone, and there was a shift in tone. And I don't know if it was on the other side. I don't know at what point during 2020 it started in earnest. I started noticing it. I was starting to notice that I was drifting away from of sort of on my own because of what I was on my own getting into. I didn't have a whole lot of time. I wasn't spending a whole lot of time with what at that point would have been traditional fandom menace individuals. I was already starting to produce stuff like this. Like I was starting to do my own thing and trying to figure that shit out. And when I asked for help to several different people, hey, when you have a minute, can we talk about, as I was first getting started or whatever, um, there was the absence, the fucking the silence. Not even a, "Oh yeah, dude," and it never happened. There wasn't even an acknowledgement that I had fucking send these DMs or these tweets. You know what I'm saying? So that was over the summer, right around where I was hitting like 100. I had 100 subs on YouTube, and there was this sort of crisscross of, "Hey, I kind of think I'm done with this party," and I wanted to thank a lot of people who got me to that 100 subs in a very short period of time on YouTube, and the people who I had, that had dropped my name and helped me out and retweeted stuff, and um, uh, Drunk 3PO and a couple other people in his immediate orbit, not necessarily other people in Geeks and Gamers, but in his particular orbit or whatever have you, and to thank them for having them on and talk to them a little bit or whatever have you, to basically that's for getting me into the interest of doing what I was doing. The needing to necessarily be involved at the level that I was at wasn't something that I was interested, as like I said, as I was drifting off and sort of creating my own path or blazing my own path. The idea of looking forward was much more interesting, and asking questions That was another thing that we touched on earlier was asking the questions. I will be blazing my own path. Thank you very much, and and I will ask questions when questions need to be asked. I don't care who it is. Those two things didn't sit very well in a world where it was all about how are you feeding back into the funnel? How are you feeding back into the machine? If you're not feeding into the machine, then what use do we have for you? Not that anything like that was said, but there is an overall feeling from several different people, and I understand it's anecdotal, several different people that I know that over the course of the time that we've talked about the sort of if you weren't in the clique or weren't interested in doing certain things to become part of the clique, then thank you for your time, but we're now done with you. Did you get to a point with because I ended and you touched on it, but we haven't heard the full story on the book. And I think people who know the story have kind of filled in the holes. But it just occurred to me that people who don't know the story may not know specifically what you're talking about when you mention the book. The 5 volumes that you were talking about for the Fandom Menace, the Fandom Menace project. Uh, one volume was published, or at least one volume was sent to crowdfunders, wasn't it? Wasn't at least one? Mike?
Sorry, bud. I said, yeah, the books were printed in at Lightning Press in New Jersey, sitting on a pallet and waiting to be shipped. Yeah, the first volume was absolutely finished, of course. Like I said earlier, the copy edit was sent to the co-author on December 19th of 2019. So I wanted the community to have the delivery of their books for
Right.
New Year's. I mean, I really wanted them to have it for Christmas, but because that wasn't possible, I had to make sure that they got them for New Year's. So we had like 3 weeks to distribute. But well, like I've told you privately, I mean, look, I was involved in legal aspects for this situation for a very long time, and so I didn't take any opportunities to talk about it with anybody because it would compromise the work I was doing here in Canada.
Of course. Of course.
And so, I mean, now there's the civil statutes for these things have all expired. The remedies and extensions that I've sought are all expired, and there's no remedy. So it's
Right.
not really, talking about these things. It's not like I'm wagging my fist, this
No.
is
No.
it's a story of how to protect your intellectual property and how to make collaborations with other artists, because this is how we build things, people. And you're not supposed to be terrified of it or worried that you're going to lose everything just because you want to build something with somebody who's not necessarily scrupulous. And of course, we could talk about that too. But what happened was the property was stolen. He was under contract with a publisher, which is RoHigg Press, which is me, right?
Who's
I'm
he?
also the editor in chief, and I was Stephen Walton Jr. I'm the editor in chief of the publication, but I'm also his co-author. And
Right.
he was under contract with the publication,
For
but he
volume
was
1.
also under contract with me for
For
all of them, for everything. What are
for
you
all
talking about? For
5
the whole
volumes.
project.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
no, no. He came to me with an idea. He came to me with an idea for a project about a showcase for the community, and he had his
Right.
concepts all written down in Notepad. Like, this is the thing. I think I sent you the first letter Steven sent to me, right?
Right. Yes. Yes.
And I need everybody out there to understand, you don't have to be a writer, okay? Like, I'm not trying to diminish anybody's capacity, their dreams, or their abilities, or anything like that at all, okay? I just want to make something clear. I was sent 53 kilobytes of data in Notepad, not WordPad, Notepad, all right? With no capitalizations, no sentence structure, no paragraphs, nothing. All right. The whole thing had to be mounted into my editor, and I literally had to rewrite the thing line by line, regardless of the fact whether the man could write or not. I don't
Right.
think anybody really quite understands. All right. I really don't think anybody understands when you bring me a roll of fucking toilet paper with pencils on it that you've written over 3 months. It's really hard to, tease that shit out. Do you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
So, regardless of having to rewrite someone who can or can't write, and I'm not going to talk about his abilities, I'm just going to tell you that line by line, that entire thing was rewritten. And I'm talking about one volume. He didn't have any volumes. He had concepts and ideas and things that he had written about topics he wanted to talk about. I created a program and a project surrounding this material and broke it all down. It was so large of an idea, and he wanted to cover so many things that I had to break it into these volumes. You understand? And I sent you the project outline today, I believe.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so these things were all laid out to him, and then the contract was sent to him, and people don't. Oh, I didn't have it notarized by a public official. Listen, people, we work in the digital sphere. Anybody that doesn't understand that when you send an email, do you know what? First of all, from a legal perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not advising anybody. I'm just giving you some education. Do you know what email stands for? Go
Electronic
ahead, tell
mail.
me.
Electronic mail.
Nope,
What
wrong
does it
again.
stand for?
Evidence, evidence mail. Okay, because the digital footprint is depending on how many servers it get bound. How can you recover it? Like the data is always recoverable. Do you understand? No matter how you
Oh
try
yeah.
to,
Oh yeah.
it's just the nature of our communication system. So that's what it's called, evidence mail. So when you send a contract to somebody, right, and it's 17 kilobytes, and they send it back to you, and it's 18 kilobytes, and it has their little okay, and they don't say no. What does that mean in contract law? What it means is you've assented to the contract because you've added material to it. And then if you put additional information or an addendum, as you would call it, and
Mm-hmm.
you extend the project, you are showing your ascension and your intention, essentially, to go forward with what you have agreed upon. And people say, you don't have anything signed, you don't have this, you don't have that. I'm going to tell you right now, signature is only one element that is necessary for a contract to be valid, and it's not exclusionary. All
So
right, I'm going to tell people that right now.
the analogy would be
When I send you a digital contract that doesn't have your address on it, and it doesn't have any of your phone number, and it doesn't have your information, and you send that back to me in agreeing with the contract, and you've stuck all your information on there, what have you done to the document? You've signed it. Don't you
yeah,
understand?
in the affirmation.
Okay,
Correct.
well that's
Right.
okay, but that's contract law. And when you do that in an email, I've just told you that's called evidence mail, and I sent you all those today too.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that when you accede to a contract, and I don't know if did I send you the actual contract?
No.
I found it, eh? I'll
Oh.
send you the actual contract. It's 37 pages long.
Right.
It's first, and I based my contract off of the Canadian Broadcast Corporation's editorial contract, which is just a regular boilerplate, public servant contract in Canada, and
Mm-hmm.
I modified the end portions and then, our amounts and everything and our breakdowns. I modified it at the end because it was an independent publication, right? It was two independent authors, and it gave us a get out clause. And the get out clause, like I explained to you today, I, it was my first real publication. It was my first real contract situation. So I wanted to be loose, right? So at the end of it, I put a simple get out clause where anybody can get out at any time for any reason. You don't even have to give a reason. All
Right.
you have to do is pay for the materials and the work that's been done for everybody so far.
Up to
Like you
that
have to,
point.
everybody's got to split it. Everybody's got to split it, right? And you got to give your partner 60 days notice. That's it.
And
No other conditions.
common
No
sense.
other conditions. Right. And that was the only thing that I changed at the end because in government employees in Canada, there's all this bullshit. So I just took all that shit off the end and I wrote, one for us, like getting out. Right.
Right.
And so, like I said, he assented to the contract. It's plain and simple. And I'm going to explain to everybody. I showed you my legal applications for that case.
Mm-hmm.
There's no judge who's going to give me extensions for 2.5 years on a case that has no merit.
Right.
So if anybody out there that knows legal affairs knows anything, no judge is even going to listen to me if there's no merit to the case. All right. So
Which is
the
important to
center of the case was
which is important to note that we're not interfering in anything that could potentially happen
nope,
or anything
no,
that
and the
is
reason
pending or anything
and
like
I'll
that.
explain.
Right.
No, and I'll explain the reason for that is for everybody that's legal and understands.
Right.
I'm in Canada. He's in Delaware. All right. So for him, he's got to come to answer to the charges because the jurisdiction that the contract dispute is happening in is the jurisdiction of Westmoreland in Canada. So he has to respond in Canada, or he has to have a lawyer respond in Canada, right?
You mean that's his
The
last
point
known
is,
official address? Is that
well,
what
no,
you
but
mean?
see, we just like anywhere else, our civil laws, Americans and Canadian civil laws, are very streamlined, right? So I can serve documents on him in Delaware. It doesn't matter. He still has to produce himself for the court here. You understand?
Right. If he's
I
in
can still get a
Delaware.
default judgment against him. Well, no, so we tried service of documents for months, right? Like I've got aerial photographs of his fucking house, his car, his van, everything. We couldn't serve him, but
You couldn't serve him because you couldn't
he
find him, or he was,
well,
or
he was he
that.
was what we call.
Okay, go.
I've sought three extensions. Sought three extensions for evasion of service.
Okay, all right. That's what I
All
was.
right. So what
Okay,
happened?
that's an
Exactly. And
important
so
distinction.
I got ultimately three extensions, and the last one expired on May 4th of 2022.
Because I could have a property no one knows about and legitimately not
Well,
fucking
this is
know.
what happened.
And if you're trying to serve me and I
Well,
legitimately didn't know, it's not, and you could prove it for whatever, or however you could do that, it is a legitimate thing in law. But if
Of
the
course,
important
of
distinction is
course.
if you're conveniently, you're never at fucking work, or you change work, or you move, things like that.
If you're a career criminal,
Correct.
and you know how to evade service of documents, you know exactly what you're doing.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I had sheriffs all over the Delaware trying to track him down. Believe me, these are good fellas. I've talked to them many times. I have a great respect for my American neighbors and friends, and believe me, it's nothing. It's not political. It's just a stupid business contract dispute. Really, it really
Oh,
is. And
totally.
for everybody in the industry to be able to understand what was happening instead of ignoring the situation, it could have helped a lot of people understand, and also help people avoid conflicts, because it's writing a good contract, even if you're not a lawyer, like just figuring it out together and being thoughtful is way better than chaos. I'm telling you.
Oh, most
And
definitely.
people,
And I don't know how it is in Delaware, but I know here in Colorado that anyone can serve anyone. You just there's a serving paperwork that goes into it. They don't need to know what's in there. Just like, hey, bub, here's $50. Go hand these to that dude over there.
well,
So
yeah, see here it's a 39, it's a form called, in my jurisdiction, it's called a 39J. It's a service of documents proof. And so basically you serve your documents, date and
right,
time, all of the,
right,
stipulations to how you serve them, how you identified them, how you knew it was
correct,
them, where they
correct.
were, blah blah blah. Do you have a video or a picture,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
you go and swear to the commissioners of oath you're turning,
Correct.
anybody.
Right.
In most civil law, yes. In most civil law, yes, it works that way.
Hmm.
Not everywhere, but in most civil jurisdictions, yeah, you
So
can
you
serve
weren't
anyone
able to find him.
unless
So you you're under the earnest impression that he was trying to evade. He was aware of what you were trying
well,
to
no, I
do.
knew. Oh, I knew. I knew he was still active in the community. He was still being supported by many people. Some might be listening. I don't know. Maybe that's the thing. Nobody from my end talked about anything in reality because I was in front of the courts. Why would I throw my own case?
Right.
He's the one online making videos. He's the one online defaming me. I'm not saying anything. I didn't say anything. I wrote quietly and gave notice to the people that were involved and the people
What?
that needed to know. Some of them refused to answer. They weren't involved like in culpability of anything. They just needed to be aware to avoid collateral damages or conflicts. But they simply refused to answer. I mean, that's not on me. I did my work. I did my due diligence. You
So
understand?
explain to me how he's trying to defame you. So at what point does this
Oh well,
break down to where
like I said, the proof edit copy was delivered on December 19th, and
that's
on December 30th, the night before New Year's, he fired me. Suppose I don't like see this is the thing that everybody has to understand here. When you sit down with a partner and you sign a contract with your partner, he's not your employee.
you? I
Like,
know
do you understand what I'm saying?
you're getting the cart before
You
the horse.
can't
So
you
tell the
well no
line
but
and then
you
come back.
can't.
I know.
He fired me.
Right.
He tried to fire me on New Year's Eve publicly on a fucking live stream. You
Right.
listen, people. You can't fire someone who is your partner. Okay, like it's not your employee. All right, he was under contract to my publication. He was in violation of a contract against the publication. Forget about me as a co-author. All right, he stole intellectual property, delivered it to the public after having taken my name off it, and my cover artist helped him do it. And if he's listening, he knows who he is,
That's the shit
and
that
he didn't have the right. Well, he didn't have the right to do that. And that the second cover for Volume 2, that was literally stolen right from the Library Index of Canada's files, he made a cover for Volume 2, of which two of the participants didn't even agree to be on the cover, and they sold that for another 10 grand a year
their
later.
their images weren't
So if he's
they weren't approved. Nothing.
they were not
That's
endorsed. They were not
nope.
endorsed.
Nope.
And my name is on that project according to the law, and they stole intellectual property and published it anyway. All right. So like it's really awful. And
But
the people in the community that should have been able to benefit from that literally.
wait, say that you broke up there at the end
All
there.
right. I said the people in the community that should have known that he was a fraudster,
Mm-hmm.
they ignored what was happening, and then he defrauded them. I've heard that he wrecking balled his way through everything pretty much.
Well, yeah. That the I full disclosure, I don't know. Again, my orbiting them ended a while ago,
Well,
and
like I
when
said,
you
in
brought up his
2020, it
name,
was over for me as well.
right?
Well,
And
in
so
2020, it was over for me as well, obviously.
that
But the
was
thing is that
yeah.
the people that I paid to find him figured out that he had finally scurried all around the country after screwing everybody over in multiple different ways. And like, nobody even knows this, but he was on multiple crowdfunding platforms and apps after he learned how to do it from me, obviously, where he was just pretending to be different entities and kids looking for charity. Like he ran all these campaigns, like he literally scammed his way across the country. Literally, that's what I've heard. And some of the people that I've paid to find him, he finally got his way to Florida in a place where I can't seize his assets.
Oh, isn't that fucking convenient?
Oh, so he's not guy that doesn't know what he's doing. You see,
Yeah, and he stays hidden just long enough for everything to. Yeah, it's. It,
indeed. I
I'm.
hear they
I'm.
got a lot of alligators down in Florida, though.
Well, I'm curious if he learned that or if it was something that I don't know, because the timing of it, and this was some of the thing that I was going over. As I'm looking at screenshots, as I'm looking at emails, as I'm reminiscing about what all I remember from that time frame, and don't make I'm trust me when I tell you that I wasn't involved in any sort of meetings or anything like that. This is just somebody from the periphery that was watching strange things happen in front of me.
Oh
And then
yes.
when I would try to tell some of these people, because every single one of them's younger than me, so I literally don't like give a shit. I guess I don't have that millennial fucking personality or whatever. I'm just like that sounded like shit, dude, or that was gay, or you should, I would avoid that, or that person's toxic, or I would say things like in the back. I would say one or two things, and if they responded to it, and some people did, they appreciated. I was seeing shit happen, from a distance. They were too close to it. Other people, to your point earlier, just fucking straight up ignored it, and I was like, okay, well, bye. Because it gets to a point where if you don't if you're not even going to allow me to help you because I'm not dropping monthly subscription, it, it, we weren't who I thought we were to each other. I thought we were cool. I thought we were content creators that were kind of quote unquote growing up together,
Well, it
that
grew
kind of
into
thing.
it
And
grew
then
into something else. But you have to
right.
understand that the YouTube platform itself manipulates creators into tribalism.
Oh, most definitely.
Like this, like it's not just the personality. Like we can't it like
It's viewed as though
when
you're
we are
stealing
creatures.
views. You're stealing views. If you
Well, no,
create
no,
a
I'm not
channel,
talking. Now wait,
that's
I'm not.
how. That's
Now wait,
I don't. I
I'm
don't want
not
to put
talking about
words
the
in.
clash of person. Oh
Right.
no, I know. I'm not talking about the clash of personalities. Because look, let's get a couple things straight. I've always maintained this in the Indosphere. In the Indosphere, it's independent sphere, right? So these people are all
Yeah.
independent creators. They've learned how to do things their own way. Like
Hmm.
of course, these personalities are going to clash. Of course, that's why I used to counsel people to be careful with each other all the time. You see, like
Hmm.
you have to understand that about each other to be able to build things. You have to know these people are going to clash. They're very strong personalities. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be doing what they're doing, you see. And that
Well,
was the remarkable thing. But like you said, it became with money and influence, it became something else.
it did, and there's a palpable transition because once one hit it, and it was like, okay, I think I have a formula. And then it was like this boom, 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 boom. And then everyone that person touched got monetized, like it was this inevitability. Like if this person touched you, you were going to become monetized because there was an equation that had been figured out. Do six of these, do four of those, do three of these a day, and bada bing. And it was just this self-fulfilling. There was this um, self-fulfilling prophecy almost. However, what I was watching was it became this narrowing of focus to where the vast majority of groups were no longer interested in a, to your point, tribal, as in there's 15 of us tribes that kind of make a country. No one was interested in that shit anymore. And everyone was just like, all right, I'm doing my own thing. And if you're not part of my party, I don't want anything to do with you. And at that juncture, when it became, you say tribal, I cliquish, that sort of thing. But it's this, it like the gates were closed, the defenses were put up, and it was protect the brand at all cost. And once that transition happened, and it was, at least from my point of view, there was a lot of stuff that was going on with COVID where everyone was like, well, what the fuck do we say on YouTube? If I say COVID or if I, drop an article, everybody was, both here and in Canada, people were, and overseas, over in England and the UK and Australia, people were tripping out on getting kicked off of social media and YouTube and banned
I'm
and
so
and
glad I was gone by the
all
time that
kinds of
started
shit
happening. I'm so
that
glad
it
I was gone.
it changed. Not only were they under this pressure of now you have to produce several videos a day, or now you have to produce stuff 5 days a week for 3 hours a day, you know what I mean, to be a part of this machine that was, once you started making money, you can never not make any less money than you did yesterday. And so it became, well, shit. And then the mindset changed, and then the personalities changed, who they hung out with, who was on their shows, everything about a large function of the culture was changing before our eyes. And a lot of it had to
Well,
do
and the part,
because people, the
well,
scariness of COVID and wearing the mask, don't wear the mask, get the shot, don't get the shot. And there were those of us that were like, freedom, fuck you and your shot, I'm not putting that mask on. And then you had other people who were in this industry feigning conservatism, feigning freedom minded, individualistic minded thinking, capitulating because they had fucking videos to make. Oh, I have to go to the park today, so I'm putting on my mask, even though I just told my people that I think wearing a mask is stupid. Well, what the fuck? Which fucking is it, dude? I'm going to judge you by your actions. So if you're doing all the things that we deem now to be absolutely asinine, and some of us were telling you at the time, hey, dude, that looks fucking asinine, yet you continue to do it, even though we told you it looked asinine, then someone else tells you it looks asinine. You're like, oh, fuck, I think it looks asinine. Oh, okay. That's how this shit works. That's cool. And that goes back to what we were talking about before. There were some of us that were seeing this shit as it was fucking occurring because we've been to other countries, we've been around the world, we've been in wartime settings, we've seen political aspirations from different countries. And there was a lot of bullshit, which turned out to be, as we know now, the Twitter files and the government and the U.S. government trying to get in with Twitter and change the narrative and control it and ban people and do all kinds of crazy shit. And that's exactly what I was watching this fandom menace turn into, was the cancel culture. They just spent 2 fucking years becoming popular about and quote unquote fighting. It was like, wait a minute,
well,
what
when
the fuck did we just
isolationism,
what did we just evolve
but what,
into? This doesn't make any sense.
well, that's when isolationism, because we were happy in our little bubble. Remember, like it goes full circle. It grew and grew and grew in this bubble, in our happy little bubble, and it became something completely different. Like when an organic space of personalities grows to a certain extent, it has to be able to expand. And when you have such restrictions that are happening at this time, and like I said, I'm so glad that I wasn't part of any of the video delivery during that time, because it sounds awful. I was very busy in the courts in 2020, late September of 2020, and beginning all through 2021. I started working as a prosecutor instead of just a litigator. So
Mm,
I was very busy with very different things. Because you talk about COVID,
yeah.
I as a veteran, we had a declared state of emergency here for the country, the Emergencies Act they called it. And so, under the National Defence Act of Canada, as a veteran, technically reactivated. And so I used that opportunity to give myself standing at the provincial court, which is a state level court, or a federal court, you guys would call it. Not for state level crimes, but for federal crimes, because in Canada, all crimes are federal. So
Okay.
as a prosecutor, essentially, it's like a district attorney. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a veteran who watched the lockdown happen in a very different way, because I'm in Canada, obviously. And I was also had been isolated because of what happened after this book program, and the destitution it caused, and the ripple effect in real life, with almost $25,000 being stolen from me, essentially. It
Uh,
caused a lot of
unin,
difficulty. But that
unin,
whole period of time, it shifted the entire society, and all of the
Right.
tribalism and fracturing that already had been happening at that point. I know even just in real life, it got accelerated to a degree where isolationism turned into protectionism. And I mean
Oh
that on
yeah.
a personal level too.
Mm-hmm.
You just said it to yourself. It's me. It's just about me. I want to make my money and look after me and fuck everybody else, right? Like it really became a psychological thing for all of society, not just our little corner. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, it yeah,
You
it
know,
well,
obviously
it,
there was
there were multiple factors. Yes, the timing was poor. There were multiple factors that led into it. The the last of the known Star Wars movies had just ended that December. So we had Rise of Skywalker, whatever the fuck it was called. So we're on the other side of that. There's no prospective Star Wars movies on the horizon. This is where Fandom Menace made its bread and butter. So there's no movies on the horizon, and yet we have this show called The Mandalorian, which is getting ready to drop right before Rise of Skywalker. Will it have legs? What's the future of Star Wars? There was a lot of angst going into 2020.
last review
Just
last review of a Star Wars product I ever did.
right. And okay, so you have that, an end of an era. There's potentially no Star Wars movies in sight. You have no idea where the future, how you're going to be making videos, how you're going to be doing this, how you're going to be doing that in a YouTube platform. This is before Rumble, before, TikTok takes off and, all of this stuff. And so you have this transition into, a, you have that in conjunction with quite frankly, the scariness of what was going on with COVID, especially in the first 3 months. The unknown, the quite obviously being lied to, or knowing they're omitting information, silencing of doctors, silencing of voices on YouTube, those sorts of things were happening at the exact same time that they're trying to build a brand. I know several people who had a brand that required them to be outside. COVID hit and they were like, fuck. And that channel just went to shit. And so there was that. And then how do we make money in this? And then it was like everybody's at home, everybody's making videos. You got fucking nurses in the hospitals here making TikTok videos. So then
Well,
there,
right back to the Phantom Menace thing with the case I
right,
was working on in the first of 2020. I had to have my hearings for the preliminaries postponed three times because of domestic like family court needed the court time, and I got bumped and bumped and bumped through that time. So it was turning everything upside down.
yeah, it had there were multiple factors that were going into, and this is just this is just stuff we know. We're not even getting into like people's personal lives or whatever have you, but there were multiple factors that led into it. Not excuses, but reasonable reasonable expectations aside, I think that the blindsidedness of the transition, especially over that summer, away from what appeared at the time to be a cohesive group and to become more of fractured identities that just followed specific individuals. That there was no longer the need, want, or desire for a banner. I don't need a Phantom Menace. I've got these 3 or 4 people I watch, and that's all I need. There wasn't this need to be part of a crew, this counterculture punk movement that was against the new Star Wars. You know what I'm saying? There weren't these multiple
Well,
layers of emotion that were added onto it that made that when they first started, that was the direction, but the inability to
yeah,
then pivot and recognize other voices that could then strengthen the solidifying everything down to a narrow funnel of yes men and yes women. I At the time, some of us were pointing it out, but of course it fell on deaf ears. To what extent it was talked about, I have no idea. I actually don't care. I know it was talked about. They know it was talked about. Um, these different warnings, but to your point, as far as the tribalism goes, the defining factor where I was just like, because I did go through a moment of, am I making the right decision? Does this make sense? Am I overreacting? Am I seeing things that aren't there? The thing that really kicked it off in my head was the Gina Carano thing. So once I saw the vast majority of the people I used to respect, and I'm not saying Gina was right, wrong, or taking a side, whatever have you, but watching the NPC sort of cancel culture fucking drone. I don't even know what to call it, but it was just this chirping, "We love China," and it was like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not. I don't think there's a reason not to. My point is to watch this phenomena happen, quote unquote, organically, was fucking weird because you had thousands of people who were making videos at this point in the game that weren't making videos 2 years ago, and we had to
Oh, I
rely
remember.
on your Doomcocks and your Geeks and Gamers and your other people to bring us the videos because no one else was making videos. And then, but once people started making their own videos, or God forbid, not necessarily totally fucking agreeing with the videos that were already out there, it became this very narrow sort of pyramid of the cool kids versus those over there. And the no, we were no longer in the days of, rising tide lifts all boats. It was very much, what have you done for my brand? I think we touched on that, but that
Well, I
was
mean,
that
I
was very
remember.
instrumental going in from 2020 for me, anyways. From going from 2020
Yeah.
into 2021 was that Gina
Well, I
Carano
remember the. I remember just before, well, like season two's Gina Carano for The Mandalorian, right? And
that had
so
right.
I finished up. I finished up my review for the first season, which was appalling. Like I said, it was the last product that I reviewed for Lucasfilm, and so um, when season two started, and you're right, the saturation of the market, we call it, because there's so many creators, it just sounded like a buzz. It was retarded. It was retarded. Everybody's trying to score, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough room. There's not enough room for that, first of
No.
all, And aside from that, since from my point of view, from 2016 to 2020, we hate Disney, we hate Disney, we hate Disney, we hate Disney. Enough is fucking enough. Like, move on. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't like the property, don't, like it was just ridiculous. And I remember how ridiculous it was because every time I tried to, because like I said, I jettisoned after my property was stolen, and I got the response from the OGs who were supposed to be trying to promote everybody at that time. I jettisoned the whole toxic fucking lot of them. Like I never spoke to any of them, most of them, like, ever again. Like I served some of them documents and things like that from the courts, but like I've never spoken to some of them ever again and have no intentions to. It's not my, like I said, I'm not here to,
Right.
oh, please cry for me and oh, help me.
No,
Like,
no, no,
there's
no,
nothing to be
no.
done about this. I'm just telling people, what
Right.
happened. And so um
And that's not even,
these.
and to touch on that real quick, that is not even where this conversation initially what was going to go. It was something
No.
that evolved over the course of just having discussions and reminiscing and those sorts of things. And
Well, I
um
think it came to a point where we were talking. I was just talking about politics and crap like that, and then you said something, and all of a sudden, I think I went, "Oh, you want to talk about the Phantom Menace?" And I think
right.
that's all of a sudden everything it connected in our brains. And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute!" And then,
Well,
well, then we had a different conversation, right? But
Well, well, yeah. I mean, talking to someone who was, on the periphery and just, looking at it from a wholly different set of eyes
well,
than
well,
someone
I
who was in your
wasn't, but I
position.
wasn't on the periphery. I worked at that time.
No,
We had
me.
three
I was
major
talking.
newspapers for our community. Oh,
Yeah, I was
I
talking
was
about
going to say we had
myself. Yeah.
three major newspapers for
Uh
the
huh.
community at that time, like I said, and everybody still at that time. I mean, they were still. I still have this fellow that's still asking me to promote his stuff. He sends me DMs like almost every month. The poor little fella, and like I don't do promos anymore, stuff, right? And,
Wow.
but the thing is, I remember that time specifically because I really wanted to have my review of the Dark Crystal. That I it spent 6 months working on it, and I had a big spread for everything, a review of the whole season, the big magnificent work that they had done, and the Mandalorian crap had interrupted that, and I was trying to finish the Dark Crystal stuff. And I remember trying to work while listening to everybody during the day while I'm working, like I always did. And like
Right.
you said, it was just this crazy, crazy, oversaturated buzz, and I couldn't find a thumbnail that didn't look like the next one, and it was just, well, it was retarded, right?
Yeah. Uh, fun stuff. And then yeah, so everybody who's stuck with us this long, I appreciate it. It's sort of an eclectic group of individuals that had a fiery passion for their disdain of the direction the entertainment industry was going. And I think the
And
longer it
don't get
went,
anybody wrong. There was a huge effect. There was a huge effect that they had. Like, don't nobody
oh,
should be
totally.
mistaken. Like
No.
that community changed things, even though there was massive resistance to it. Like, make no mistake, that community changed things. When you have Dave Rubin having some guy on there saying the Phantom Menace threatened Disney, well, that's pretty big news. When you're getting mentioned in Esquire
Dude,
magazine and
yeah.
things like this, for it was a different time.
I don't know a lot of these people personally. Like I didn't have interactions with them, and I didn't. Well, no, no, no. I'm going to caveat this. There are a lot of people who have really grown out of this community. Um, Regardless of what you think about them personally, to your
Sure.
point,
Oh, of course.
talking about Dave
Yeah.
Rubin or whatever have you, you have Eric July, you
No,
have
no, I just meant that
a cup. Totally,
there was a strange mention of the Phantom Menace during one of his shows, and I thought, well, that's weird. Look at that. They're talking about my property, honey. Look at that. It was
exactly.
just
So when
very,
it comes,
just very strange.
well, it was a cultural phenomenon, and I think that's the point that needs to be driven home
Absolutely.
is whether or
Yeah.
not you agreed with him. And again, we were both involved on some level, him completely different than mine, with the Phantom Menace, or at least orbiting them, following them daily or weekly or whatever it was, involved in that fashion, going on super chats and playing games with them, and involved with different entities within that Phantom Menace community. It there was I will never ever speak badly about the why and the how and the who was involved in the creation. How it then evolved from this breakdown. It sounds like there were multiple schisms that began to occur, not the least of which is this one, which was going to be a catalog of all these different Fandom Menace personalities. Everyone had a vested
A show,
interest
a
in it.
show, a showcase, a
Right.
showcase. Apparently, yeah, but we have to remember too. There's a lot of creators. Remember, and we're back to that spirit of independence as well. A lot of people were interested at first, and then some of them were wishy-washy, and then some of them didn't want to take part at all. And I specifically want to apologize to Mecca. She didn't give any permission for her face to be featured on Volume 2. That's not my work. That's a
Right.
stolen work that was
Right.
published without my permission and without my consent. And Mecca was very, very angry at me. And I even talked with her this past year because I was
Right.
worried about her. And she flipped out on me again.
I don't
And
know
it's
why.
not her fault.
I don't know why I
No, it's
remember
not her fault.
that.
No, it's not her fault. That project was brought to her
Oh
attention
yeah, no, no,
from
no.
me.
Oh,
And
totally.
someone took the liberty of taking her image, right,
Right.
and using it without her permission. She has every right to be upset. I'm just telling everybody the same thing I told her. They did not have my permission as a publisher to use that, and they didn't seek your permission to use your images either. And
Right.
so
And
I understand I'm the publisher that owns the property, but people need to understand this was stolen. Okay.
and
Same thing goes for John Talks. He didn't give his permission to be on that cover either. Right.
no.
That destroyed a relationship that I had with a very good man.
So they to this day still believe that that was all you. That you were somehow involved in any of that, and that what
Well,
this
obviously, if I'm the project creator and I'm the project manager and I'm the project editor and I'm the one that's been trying to help coordinate everybody with promotions, whose fault do you think it is when the man runs off with the money?
you mean the sole guy who's in Canada when the rest of the project is in the United States?
Well, that made it convenient. Well, that
And
made it convenient too, didn't it?
international
Because
laws as
our
retarded as
lockdown.
Alabama twins. Yeah, dude. This whole thing is this whole
Stinks.
fucking stinks. It fucking
Yeah,
stinks. It sounds to
exactly.
me like they found a goober
Well,
across the pond.
Stephen found, like, there's
Steven
you have
found
to
it.
understand from what I no, he found a way to manipulate and defraud the people that he deceived. All right. And I'm not the only one because, like I
Right.
said, I had to pay people to find this idiot. And to all the people in the Phantom Menace that he affected, believe me when I tell you, I know what he's done to you. And so does he, obviously, if he's
Hmm.
listening. um it's not my justice that's coming for you, Steven. It's not like there's nothing that can be done. Like, okay, you ripped me off for 25 grand, good for you, bud. It's not like you didn't really get away with it, right? Because now you're gonna be running forever. Like, it's really awful, right? Because believe me, when I started really digging in and talking to marshals and FBI people to try to locate, like, I got to serve this guy documents, 25 grand.
Hmm.
These people were quite interested in who this man was, and like I said, he's not just running from me anymore.
But there's
Okay, so
right.
you
So
know these
did
people don't understand. It had nothing to do with me. This man had
okay.
the pallet of books ready to be delivered to him from Lightning Press in New Jersey to his home in Delaware, like 84 miles or 84 kilometers. What's that, like 62 miles away or whatever?
60,
Just
yeah, 55, 60 miles.
across the fucking river, basically
Right,
across the
right.
Hudson or whatever the hell it is, right?
And
And
he fires you on New Year's Eve
what happened?
20 twenty
Yeah,
nineteen.
and so Paul, my printer at Lightning Press in New Jersey, Paul, like we're talking, and Paul's like, well, I already print because the copy, like I said, the copy edit was sent to Steven. Like one copy of the finished book was sent to him to say, do you like this? Yes or no? Are we going ahead to print? And he said, yes. So then
Right.
we printed them. Okay. So after he fired me on a stream, our pallet of books is sitting in New Jersey, wrapped up on a pallet, waiting to be shipped. It's just that as the publisher, he won't turn over the money from the crowdfunding, so I can't ship them to him, and I can't ship the Canadian books or the international books to anybody else because I don't even have money to pay my printer. You see,
This
my
is
printer
volume
has it,
this is
my
volume 2.
printer volume one, no volume one,
Volume
volume
1.
one.
Okay.
My printer, Paul in New Jersey, literally has in good faith printed out these products for us because he can see the result of our crowdfunding campaign and he knows that this money is coming. Blah 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 blah. Steven just took off. You understand?
Oh
And the
fuck.
thing is that a week later, he showed up at the loading dock at Lightning Press in New Jersey with his truck, and he's in a fight with the guy on the loading dock. And I'm this is not an exaggeration because Paul called me in the middle of the afternoon, and he was lucky because I had court that morning and I had just got home. And he said, I got this crazy guy out here with his truck saying he wants his books. I said, what's his name? He said, Stephen Walton. I said, what's the name on your invoice? It says RoHigg Press, Mike. And I said, who's the editor? He said, you are. I said, tell him to fuck off. Do you need a court order or should you call the police? He goes, I'll call the police, Mike. I don't give a fuck. So
That's
they essentially
craziness.
told Stephen to shove off. No, they told Stephen to shove off because basically he was going to take the money and then he was going to ship the books out to everybody so he could keep his promise and make himself look good to everybody. But he still kept 15 fucking grand. Do you understand?
So the book
So he basically just tried to show up and take the books, and Paul told him to shove it. So you know what happened to the books, everybody? The first volume was totally printed, 500. You know what happened to the books? I told Paul to shred them. It's his product. They weren't paid for.
hmm,
Shred them,
hmm.
Paul. I'm sorry. So I had them destroyed. All right, and he sold them anyway. He had my cover artist redo the cover with my name off of it. They even cut forward and everything on the back. They're so stupid. Those things were already turned into the courts. I already sent that to you.
Mm-hmm.
They redid the cover, ripped my name off it. They literally committed fraud against their backers. Okay, the backers that supported our project, they committed fraud against them. Okay, I've explored this in the court. So
Precisely why there's a
what's happened
catalog
is,
system for books is so that shit like this can't happen.
well, I sent you my library index of Canada, my legal, basically
Right.
my log
Right.
books of all of my products. I sent you
Right. So what so I get this, right? Now, when you reach out to these
depository for created works in Ottawa, in the capital. And my log as a creator, as an editor and a publisher, it's all listed, all my products and all of this, the IBS numbers and all those things,
right.
the ISBN numbers for all of my products, they're all listed there. So all the volumes of the Phantom Menace, all the way up to volume 5 in all omnibus editions, digital editions, all of them, they're all in my logs. I own them all. It's just that these people have, without challenge through COVID, been able to, because believe me, Stephen does what he does, but the community are the people that silenced me on his behalf.
Well, what happened?
I'm sure he didn't pay anybody any of that money. I'm sure he paid nobody that money. It's not like he went to, somebody high up in the Phantom Menace and said, hey, mute Mike from these groups and I'll give you $1,000. I don't think he gave anybody any money.
No, but
I think that he scammed everybody.
So why? But this is my point, though. If he scammed everybody and everybody should be pissed, then why the fuck weren't some of these big names, some of these longtime people who've been playing in the Phantom Menace sandbox for a very long time? Why didn't they get pissed off?
This is the only regret that I have.
Where the fuck?
Well, this is the only regret that I have. Like the regret that I have, that I stayed quiet to maintain my standing in the courts so that I could have a case, obviously, instead of making sure that I confronted people properly to make sure that they understood what happened.
Correct.
Right? I didn't push in that way hard enough.
Understood. But where the fuck were these other people? These other people that, I mean, we can name names.
Well,
I mean,
I can't.
They may have.
Well, I can't. Well, we can.
I can name names.
Can, but you can't make people take. Well, yeah, but
No, I get
we
that. No,
can't
no,
make
no, no,
people
no,
take
no.
responsibility for Stephen Walton Jr.
No, no, no. I'm not saying that there's some sort of action that should be taken because there was inaction. My point is that if it is so clear cut and dry as to what occurred, and it appears to me based off of what I've seen that that's exactly what happened. There may be
Well, it's just a
details that are a
contract
little
dispute,
fuzzy or
really.
whatever the minutia, but exactly. But the fact of the matter is there was no attempt from the community in and of itself, this community that was relying on you to catalog and document their existence on the internet, their rise to fame, their monetization and big name, this, that, and the other thing. And not a
Well, yeah, when
single
Stephen
one of
called me
them.
mentally, called me mentally ill and said that I was addicted to meth and fired me on supposedly fired his contracted partner on New Year's. A lot of people, obviously.
This
I
rose
mean, Stephen was a very
no red
popular person.
flags. Okay,
Well,
Steve.
I don't, like I said, I can't speak for other people, but what I can say is this: is that there is a darker side to it, and there was other things going on in the background. And I don't mean the whole community. I mean a core group of people around, like we could say, like Stephen's clique, let's say, or the
Right.
people that he was moving with. And if we have to say that some of these were, I'm not mentioning any names, but I have to say that they're higher ups, some of them in the old OG Phantom Menace, they were. Some of them, I'll just tell you, I'll give a hint to some of the people. One of the people that was involved in essentially an expansion of the theft of my properties is somebody that's died of a COVID shot in our community.
Hmm.
So these people, I mean, if they're listening to me now, they obviously know who they are. But these people planned on taking
Right.
my project outline, turning it into a documentary format, and literally going to Skywalker Ranch and presenting it. And I'm not. I know that sounds absurd because it is, but that I'm telling you, that was what the plan was. And somebody told me about it, and I said, "This is bullshit. Like that sounds silly. Like George Lucas is never going to listen to any of these people." Um, Regardless of whether it was my idea, that it was so absurd. Like it was silly. Like he's not going to listen. It's just another angry fan movie. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't care. He sold the property, leave him alone. But these people were vehement at the time, and like I said, it really was. Well, I asked you this question earlier: if something is worthless, why would you steal it, right?
And that's my point too. Is that why didn't someone fight hard enough? You know what I'm saying? Like this is something that if I'm remembering correctly, based off of what you've been saying, and then my own personal experience, this was something we were all excited for. They had trading cards that had Phantom Menace
Oh,
personalities on it.
absolutely.
They had
Oh, yes,
they
you
had
got
a
it.
book. They had a T-shirt. I had a fucking T-shirt at one point. Um, it was a thing, and like Mike was saying earlier, it has come up in popular culture. You have Variety talking about the Phantom Menace. You have different legacy media talking about, every time you hear a small but vocal minority, that's the Phantom Menace, because the context with which they were talking, it has invaded, regardless, like we were saying before, regardless of what your point of view of the Phantom Menace was, it was a force of culture that changed and is continuing to change in different iterations. But
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
the idea of it is, I don't think very many people are calling it the Phantom Menace anymore, but I think the core idea of it is not locked down to just any one title. I think it's in part
Well,
ingrained in
see,
what
and
I
even
do
at that,
and what a
well,
lot of
see, at
people
that, even at
continue to
that
do.
time, well, I agree. And even at that time, though, like this is kind of the weird thing about me. Like I was an editorialist at Bleeding Fool who was helping someone in the Phantom Menace put out a project. Okay. So, like, people, when I remember talking,
Right.
and I don't remember if this was, I got invited on the war campaign one time, and I don't remember.
Oh, you cut out. You don't remember? Oh no. He's got to put another dime in the Canadian internet. Oh no. Maybe he can jump out, jump back in. Mike, if you can hear me, we cannot hear you. Sorry, brother.
Case it's just him. Oh,
Oh,
no worries. I'll
you
keep talking in case it's him.
you just dropped back in.
Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, where were we? Sorry.
Fuck.
I was trying to sound check.
Um, my apologies. Hold on. You asked me to remember something? Damn it.
Damn it, yeah.
I was
Shit, I
literally
don't remember
looking
where
at
we were. Well, and then
OBS. Sorry.
we were talking about a force of nature,
Right.
and the
And
Phantom Menace being a cultural phenomenon.
if it
Oh,
wasn't
and I
worth
remember being
stealing,
on this show.
right.
Oh, if it wasn't worth stealing, why would you steal it?
Right.
I was on the show and somebody asked me what's my position in all of this? Who am I? I always just thought of myself as like a commentator. I didn't really want to be anybody. I was just glad to be able to talk to these people and show other people how cool I thought they were. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't really about me. And I remember saying on this podcast once, I said, I feel as a writer at Bleeding Fool, I feel like I'm in the center of a tornado and that's all of you. And I feel like I just have to stand here in the middle of the eye and write down all the cool shit that I see without getting sucked up in the tornado. And that's how I used to describe it.
That's an apt description. That is a lot of what I mean. Bounding into comics, a lot of these people, there's a lot of commentary. Was it That Park
Well, there's a lot
Place?
of
John Trent.
colleagues. There's a
There,
lot of there's a lot of colleagues that used to work for John that we were all colleagues from different newspapers. There was no rivalries back then. There was everybody, like literally we promoted each other. Like it was so strange
right.
to now.
Oh no, I
And there's a
totally
lot of
remember
colleagues.
that.
There's a
Sorry.
lot of colleagues that I miss. There's a lot of colleagues that I miss from Bounding into Comics specifically, and also at Chaos Central, that I miss a great deal. My colleagues that we used to, as writers and talkers of culture, that I really miss. And I think the community is at a loss for their missing voices too.
I think yeah, I think it is a shame. It's unfortunate that a lot of it has gone in the direction that has gone to. I had a lot of great conversations with some of these people, both publicly and offline. Um, and it is one of those things. Business is business, and I do get that. There was a level of naivete, I think, that sort of I entered into that realm, that community with. I think I wanted it to be something that perhaps it just simply wasn't. And when the reality of like what we were just talking about, the people helping people and eagerness, I still very much do that. In the military gaming community that I'm in now, I'm more than happy to promote people. I'm more than happy to to promote different things, you know, to promote them, to you know, draw attention to their content. I think that's huge, especially for people, especially, and everyone, please listen, if you're a content creator and you're monetized, it's especially important for small up and coming streamers, gamers, whatever, vloggers, you know, VTubers, to have that. Do it privately, please. But to have that little boost is you're doing a good job. I like what you're doing. You know, reach out if you're watching people's stuff and you like it and they're a smaller channel. Let them know. Reach out privately and let them know. You don't have to draw attention to yourself and do the whole, you know, virtue signaling and aren't I, you know, a great person for lifting someone else up. But it's extremely important, especially looking backwards, to recognize where you're at in that moment. Right now, I have, you know, 200 followers here, 200 subscribers there, you know, on these streaming platforms. It's important to understand that there are people who are just starting out today, and they're just like, shit. How do I get like that guy and get to 200? I know it sounds funny, but everybody starts at zero. So you start making these little goals, and it's extremely important on the outside for a lot of these personalities to understand, much like these studios, and this is what I was trying to point out in 2020 that fell on deaf ears, is just like the studios, if you start going against your fans, if you start narrowing the scope of who you're allowing into your tribe based off of, you know, differing marginal ideas, then seriously, how much different are we than this cancel culture that we're trying to combat? it it's counterintuitive, and it goes against a lot of what I assumed would be the morals of people who just 2 years earlier were all about that rising tides and reaching out and touching bases. Hey, dude, we haven't talked in a while. Where are you at? How much you been creating? What are you dropping? What's your schedule like? Things like that. If that was how it was. This is what Mike and I are talking about. For those that don't know, this is the point of where our conversation sort of went back to the Fandom Menace. Was this the differences that used to make us special and individual as channel makers? Everybody became a carbon copy of everybody else because that was the equation. That was that was it. That was the ticket. Nope, you have to do it like this. You have to do it this many times a week, and it took the specialness and the funness out of just being a creator in the moment. And
We should talk about how everybody. We should talk about how everybody in the originals got to 5,000 subs. That would be an interesting conversation.
that it's yes, and Mike and I were talking about this offline for we did a lot of talking over the course of the week or whatever, but we sort of settled on just about this time frame. I've been getting some hand signals offline from wife and daughter. Um, we have some things planned, and not that I was booking it, whatever have you, but it's going to require me to wrap this up sooner rather than later. And that sounds like a perfect place, a perfect jump off point for next time. We could talk about the OG Fandom Menace and perhaps where are they now and those sorts of things, and then the apparent the apparent formula or equation, the magic formula that people were, you know, secret sauce that people were letting, certain people find out about and holding it close to vest. But that is okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank Mike with me. This is Mike Rogers, the EIC of RoHigg Press. Been around several years in the entertainment vlogs, the entertainment sphere, in and out of the Fandom Menace and everyone involved and some of the backstream stuff. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to, I know it's cold up there in Canada, but taking the time to go down memory lane and dig up some past. I do appreciate the drawing more light on the Stephen Walton situation. That was something that was on my periphery, and once it started to get a little traumatic, it wasn't. I was on my way out anyways, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get too involved. I do have volume 1 somewhere around here. That's what I was looking for before, and I got to find that some bitch. But anyways,
I need a copy. I need a hard copy sent to me, please, just so I can actually have a copy.
if anyone has
If
one,
anybody has one,
that'd be great.
yeah.
If I could find mine, I'll send it to you.
It doesn't have my name. It doesn't have my name. The copies
No,
you may have out there, they obviously don't have my name on it, but I have a feeling that whatever re-editing on the inside was done.
I'm sure.
I have
That's
a
what I want to
feeling that
know.
it wasn't very much.
Because I didn't even know this story, and my copy
Yeah,
it's all Steve Walton. It's all Steve Walton. There's nothing. I didn't
yeah,
even
yeah.
until we started talking, Mike. In all honesty,
Oh well,
I
shit!
was.
I have the digitals here. Does everybody want to? I got digitals here. Everybody want a digital copy, the real one?
There you go. There you go.
I'll
Yeah, but
hand them out for
I
free.
I didn't even know you were involved with the book at the time. That's how far removed from all of this it is. And I was like we were talking about before.
Well,
We were all pretty close to the fire.
I'll just give one little nugget real quick before we go. At that time, all right, there was Data Racer, Ichibaka, Steven, and I, who are what they called it, I guess, at that time, the heroes of the Fandom Menace. And so we were what I used to refer to as the archivists for our community because we did a lot of work at the keyboard, maintaining the screenshots, the record of everything, all the look. Well, that's where we get the ideas for making the showcase. So it was a really, really different time. And like I said, I miss a lot of it. There's a lot of part of it that's so toxic you don't even want to look at it now. But there is quite a few parts of it that are really, really amazing moments that you couldn't have experienced any other way. So I'm glad for the people that were there, and I'm sorry that the people that might be here now weren't. So thank you for having me, and thank you for listening to my dribble.
No, I appreciate it. I think everyone enjoyed it. As, going down memory lane and then clearing up some things. And I want to thank you for reaching out and having as comprehensive a conversation as we did have behind the lines, because I think it sort of what it does now is it there is more to talk about. There's a lot of this that I was completely unaware of, even as I moved through and around the fandom menace back in the day. So it's just extremely enlightening, especially to people who perhaps may be showing up late in the story, so they didn't necessarily know necessarily where these uh, these content creators that they know today, what was going on 7, 5, 6, 7 years ago that shaped the community. And I think that aspect of it is will be interesting to a lot of people. But and again, I appreciate you taking the time and sitting down with me and hashing a little bit of it out. And we most definitely need to do this again, and we were going on uh,
Absolutely.
other tangents.
I'll see if I can find any other lifeboat escapees and see if they want to come and add some details too. I'll see if anybody will answer, and well, we'll work something out. But thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone listening.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. We'll catch you next time, brother. I'm gonna send you to the back room real quick, and then we'll tidy it up. This actual aspect of it won't be in the podcast. I'm kind of just letting Mike know because I haven't done this in 3 years, and not a lot of people watch my shows. But I'm gonna put Mike backstage. I'm gonna wrap it up real quick, and then I'm gonna cut out of the podcast. You all are gone, and then me and Mike are gonna have a little chat after hours, little chat. So that's what's gonna be happening right now. So I want to thank you again, Mike. We're gonna go ahead and send you to the backstage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm 97 Bravo. This is The Convergence. This is episode 16. That was Mike Rogers, the editor in chief of RoHigg Press, getting a little deep into the Phantom Menace history, talking about the book and going back even deeper than that, even further than that, into the inception uh, shortly after the events leading into the creation of the Phantom Menace. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging out. Everybody who's watching live, I want to let you know how much I appreciate it. I can't even talk. I'm so excited. Thank you for hanging out on chat. I can see you. I can see all the different people watching on Twitch, Rumble, Kick, TikTok, YouTube, all that stuff. You guys are fantastic. I'm 97 Bravo. You guys be cool. We'll catch you next time. Laters.